Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman. I'm very excited to be talking to my guest today. She is literally a centenarian, and you don't really hear about those kinds of writers much, but she has got stories galore, and we can't wait to talk all about them. So, welcome to the show, Babette Hughes.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. This is a fascinating subject for me. Okay, so from what I understand, you are 101 years old.
That's right.
And when is your pending 102nd birthday?
On November 14th.
Oh, that's very close to mine. I will not be that age just yet. You've got a few years on me, but okay.
Are you
So,
a Scorpio?
yes, I am.
Well, that's interesting, I hear.
Why is that?
I don't know. People always sort of roll their eyes if you're a Scorpio.
Well, I think they roll their eyes at me, but I don't think it has anything to do with my astrological sign. It could be one of a numerous other things. Okay, so Babette, so you were 101, almost 102. So you were born in 1922
Yes,
in Cleveland, Ohio, I believe.
yes.
Okay, so this I was looking up your bio. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, 1922. I love it. A time of prohibition and bootleggers, which is perfect description of that time, and that your father was one of the first rum runners in the country, but was murdered by the mafia in a turf war at the age of 29 when you were age 2 at the time. So I'm sure your mother I know, drastic effect on the family. Like, what did your mother say about that as you were older? And I mean, what kind of effect did that have on you? Did you just kind of like make you avoid that kind of lifestyle, or did you make you want to find out things more about that time?
My mother dealt with it by lying. She told me he died of pneumonia when I was old enough to ask about my father. Uh, it's understandable. There was so much shame. This was a middle class, hardworking Jewish family, and my father was the bad boy and got into bootlegging. And as bad as it was even worse because he took his innocent brother in law with him. They were both murdered in the driveway of our house.
Hmm.
So, in addition to the obvious, there was a layer of guilt that the family had to endure. This was an innocent man who came to visit my parents, and my father was hiding from the mafia. He didn't leave his house, and when his brother-in-law and sister came to visit, he thought he'd be safe if he went out with his brother-in-law, and so they murdered both of them
In the driveway of your house.
in the driveway of our house.
Wow.
Right.
So they were waiting there for them, I guess. It was like a
They
stakeout of
they were
sorts.
they were waiting, or they could have been following them. And the story is that they were first working with knives, and the two young men fought heroically, and they didn't die. They were fighting back, and so they shot him.
Hmm.
And the two young widows were upstairs, and of course heard the shots, ran down. Uh, there was there was such commotion. The police, the family, the media, the neighbors, everyone is outside at this time. And of course, I was too young to remember it. This is just in later years when I've learned about the night. But it's just so awful. It's
Hmm.
just so terrible. And when you say, how did you deal with it? Mostly denial
Hmm.
and fantasies. When I was about 9, I thought my father was in the heaven with his gun, and he
Hmm.
wouldn't let anything bad happen to me. So I was this little kid that walked home from the library in the dark and playing with a girlfriend, and I was fearless, but I was also living in a
Right.
very sweet fantasy.
Okay, so that was in the early 20s, and you went through Prohibition, and then it went into the Depression. And so, was it just you and your mother? I mean, did you have any siblings? I mean, what was it like to experience that? I mean, I've heard from my parents; they grew up right. They came of age like right after the Depression, but their parents went through it. So to hear your perspective on it, I mean, that must have had an effect on you really for the rest of your life.
It did, but not like the murders.
Hmm.
In fact, it was a very different time. Maybe your parents have said that to you as well. But it was a very different time than now. There was not the bitter controversies with groups.
Hmm.
There was not the anger, the hate. People were all in the same boat. Maybe that's why. There wasn't you and me as a different, luckier person. We were all worried. We were all afraid. We were all needing each other. So in those ways, it was okay.
Hmm.
And compared again to the previous terrible events,
Right.
it was sort of peaceful.
Hmm. Okay. So you had talked about kind of like living in almost like a state of denial after your father's murder. Did that have an impact or an effect on your creativity? Because, looking at your bio, you did a lot of journalism uh, later on in life, and then you kind of made that transition to fiction. Did all of the events that happened, did those kind of, I guess, set up a foundation for your creativity that you were did you channel that early on, or like after you had a career in journalism, you decide, hey, I want to give fiction a try?
Uh, I'll tell you, these terrible events that I had to live through, as others did, created a unconscious, rich storehouse of of creative energy.
Hmm.
I think that's where we get our creative energy. I think that's where we get the good stuff, that when we're writing and you write, maybe you write a paragraph and you say, hey, that's pretty good. Where did that come from? And the answer is it came from your unconscious. So, in a way, I was nurtured, if that's the right word, which it isn't, but I was given a lot of stored energy in the unconscious. And that I believe, I think I've learned that's where the good stuff is.
Hmm. And so you were able to. So, what was it that inspired you to kind of make that transition from journalism into fiction? Did you just say, I have all these things that have happened in my life, and they've shaped me and they've impacted me over the years, that I just think these would make for great stories?
It was not like that. It was
Not like
not
that.
that conscious.
Okay.
It was what I'm sure you and me just don't necessarily understand uh, why we have this love of writing, why we have this creativity in ourself,
Hmm.
how we understand ourselves. These are, they're powerful and important.
Okay. No, that I totally get that. Yeah, because I mean, people say, why do you write? And I said, because I just love to create the stories. And I love these because I always tell writers, write something. For me, it's screenwriting, write something you would want to watch. And I just like the creative process and coming up with stuff that I enjoy watching, and that affects the quality of the material. So if I love
Absolutely.
right, so if I love what I'm writing, then that will be evident on the page, and hopefully that will translate to an enjoyable read for the reader or an enjoyable watch for the audience.
Right. So when when you're writing creatively, does that make you feel good, feel better?
Oh, I enjoy it because I mean, it was Dorothy Parker. You know, I hate writing, but I love having written. But I so I also like the writing part too because I just like tapping into that creative part of my brain and being able to put these stories that hopefully will entertain people on paper, and whether it's as a screenplay or as fiction, it doesn't really matter. But because I like the process of creating so much.
It's I think that's universal with creative people that you feel better.
Hmm.
I feel better. I feel more grounded. I feel more. I feel happier, and it's definitely from, as you just said, the pleasure
Hmm.
that comes from creative work.
Yeah,
We're
that
very
that
lucky, aren't we?
oh, we are because a lot of people are of the opinion that oh, it's really easy to write, and then they try it, and then they find out how hard it is,
Yes.
or that they're very critical, but they are also not even willing to give it a try themselves. So to be a writer and to just enjoy actually writing, I think a lot of writers like it more than they're willing to admit because some of them just like to complain about writing, but a lot of people are very excited. They again, it's the getting through the process is the slog, but once you're done, you can always say, "Hey, look what I was able to do," and it takes a certain not just a certain skill set, but a certain level of tolerance and patience to put yourself through this.
You're so right. And also, you got to be a little fearless.
Mm,
Fearless. Uh, fear is part, I believe, of everyone's life at certain times, or
mhm,
otherwise, we would be dead because we had no fear. But that is key to letting go.
mhm.
I don't know. Maybe there's therapy and also involved in the pleasure we get. Do you think?
Well, I think so because it's a way for you to channel whatever thoughts and emotions and ideas you have inside. That you're able to get it from, you know, mostly in your head and your heart onto the page as you're typing away. That why is somebody able to create something that is so powerful emotionally
Mhm.
something that or if they're writing a scary story you want to raise goosebumps, you want to have someone have that chill on the back of their neck and just kind of
Yeah.
when like turn around, oh, is someone watching? Or if you're writing something funny or something comedic, you hope that the person reading it laughs, that it's
Yes.
about that emotional connection. And that's one of the things they always talk about, especially for screenplays, that you're trying to access or tap into like the human connection, the human element. And I think it's a challenge for any writer to do that. But I think the more you're able to do that, that not that it gets super easy, but it gets a little easier with each draft or with each piece that you produce.
That's very interesting. Yes, you make me remember that that is a large part of my work. That this sharing, this communicating, and also the emotion.
Mm,
I'm always hoping to find emotion in my work because it reminds me of you just said about people reading it and people knowing your work and all of that. Uh, it's not anything I can call on. This needs emotion, and I'm going to make emotion. No, it comes organically,
right.
and when it comes, it's wonderful.
So let's talk about the effect or the impact that being a writer has had on you. I mean, because, I'm sure there's other things that you like to do besides write, but would you say that being able to sit down and just come up with all these different stories, that it's had such a positive impact on you, that it's, added to your energy and it's added to your vitality, that I mean, some people would think that, if I wasn't sitting around being creative, I would just be sitting there and just, being a bump on a log type of thing.
It goes back to what we said a little while ago, that there is real pleasure in the creative process. And it isn't, it's writing, it's music, it's what whatever someone does with their creative life. And it has a powerful effect on our life, our everyday life. And it's addictive, I found.
Mhm.
It means and meant so much to how I responded to it that I just needed a fix. I always I did. If I wasn't working, I missed it. And now that I'm 101, I still have ideas that flicker in my poor brain. Yes.
Well, that's the thing about being a writer. You always have more ideas than there is time to write them down or write them out. So there's always a list.
Absolutely.
There's always a list of projects still in development.
Right. Yes. This is so fun talking about writing. I love it.
I'm glad. I'm glad that that is what this show is all about. So let us talk about some of your writing. So I wrote down some of the titles that you've written. This I really want to hear more about this. The Kate Brady series, and I love the description: a gritty trilogy filled with guns and gangsters, retribution, and atonement. So it sounds like it might be set at least partially during the times we were talking about earlier, Prohibition and Depression, and I guess right before World War II.
Exactly. It really seems to that trilogy seems to come from those descriptions that I told you about that I went through. The first book is this protagonist woman who is 18, and the third book is when she's 80. And I have brought in the phenomenons of the cultures, and it also had, of course, a gangster. I seem to get something important from writing about gangsters because I do it.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a long ago question of yours, and how has this affected your writing? And of course it has. And this is something I haven't told you yet. Everyone knew who killed my father and uncle. The whole city knew, because the whole city knew the mafia was there. And they knew about bootlegging because a lot of middle class people drank bootleg whiskey.
Hmm.
So that added to the horror of the events.
Hmm. So I want to get back to the Kate Brady series. So it spans a couple of decades. So how much of your life was an impact? I mean, are some of the events in the books based on things that actually happened to you, or at least people you knew?
They are um, stored memories. They are not exactly memories. Um, it starts out with the old lady being interviewed on HBO about her husband, who was a major mafioso, and she's a widow. She's his widow, and they want her to talk about those people in that time. So that was the first story, and then the three books take us to the woman's time in New York and the person that was interviewing her, and that was the story. The the events came from that framework.
Okay, so it's in addition to writing fiction, there's also, I guess this is your memoir, 97 Speaks.
That's a collection of articles I wrote for the Huffington Post, and I put them in a book.
Okay,
And that was when I was 97.
so that was all of 4.5 years ago.
Yes.
And I love this. It includes your secret of how to live agelessly, and that includes your mantra of proceed intelligently. Now, could you please expound on that a little bit?
Do you like that?
I love it. I think it's fantastic.
I think that's so wonderful because a few of my stepchildren have put it up on their mirror in the
Mm.
bathroom. Proceed intelligently. It speaks to us, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Is that something that, I mean, was that passed down to you, or did you kind of come up with that on your own? Just you've tried to adhere to it throughout your life?
I came up on it on my own because I have had so many obstacles in my life that I've had to deal with, and proceed intelligently came out of those.
Okay.
Yes,
And is that something you try to pass on to other people? Like I don't want to say give advice, but it's like in conversation, you try to pass that along to them and hoping that it'll stick.
absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so pleased that you liked it.
Well, I don't see how you couldn't because I think maybe because it's the creative or the writer part of me that because I try to with my writing I try to entertain but also to I really hate it when a writer talks down to their audience or
Oh, yes,
doesn't treat them intelligently that you have to spoon feed information to them. I love it when a writer knows the reader gets it, and so that they can maybe drop clues about a story, or they can give subtle hints, or there's subtext that all of the information is there, but it's not going to be laid out plainly for you. That you have to pick up clues, or you have to know what a character's really saying, or oh my goodness, he gave her a look, that we know what that look means. That when the writer treats the reader as intelligent, that I think that's the best kind of writing.
and the word proceed intelligently is loaded, right?
It is. It
It's
is.
loaded.
It is. I also wanted to ask you, so your most recent book, which is Lessons in Evil, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that and what was the inspiration behind it.
This is a Nazi story. Uh, it's it's in two time periods, one right after the war and one uh, during the early 20s, I guess it is. Um, it's, I think, my best work. Do you think your most recent work is your best?
I would say it's stronger because the script that I had before this one, I kept thinking that was probably like the best my writing was going to get, and I'm happy to say I was proven wrong. Because when I started on the next script, I took the lessons I learned from the previous one and applied those to that draft or that script. And granted, I'm still rewriting the current script, but the writing in that and everything about it is a lot stronger, even though they're totally different stories, different genres. But I think it's great that you are so proud of the book because I think you should be. So what is it about this book that to you says this is my strongest work?
Uh, the writing, I think, is stronger, maybe because of the plot. It the plot has a lot of emotion. It's about the Nazi period, and it's about one family who has to escape Germany or get put in a concentration camp and killed. And it meant I'm Jewish. I don't know anyone that was in a camp, but I identify emotionally and strongly with the events because it was my generation. And there, but for the grace of God, I'd be there.
Hmm.
So I have, I think, don't you, that when you have an emotional response to your work, it's better?
Well, it's great when the writer does, but I think if you can really extract that emotion from your reader, and that especially when readers get back to you and say this really hit me hard, or this was such there's a powerful emotional story, that I think that's a recognition of not just your writing but of how you're handling the material, because it would be easy to mess this kind of story up or make it very schlocky or
Hmm.
very, I can't think of the right word, but something very unappealing that people would just think
Hmm.
that it was just it was, even though it's an important subject, that people might just think it wasn't handled well. So
Right,
for the writer to think it's their greatest work is one thing, but I think it also helps that when the readers have such a powerful and strong reaction to it.
right. The other part of this book is the idea that it, for me anyway, would be impossible to write about 6 million,
Mhm,
but you could write about one family that represents 6 million, and therefore is is doing what I'm trying to do, which is create what is important in what happened, and that it has to always, always, always be remembered.
mhm,
It's very easy, to forget, but we can't. So I don't know if that answers your your question, but it was a more than anything else that I've written. It was an emotional experience for me.
mhm.
I can't know how it affected others, although I got a lot of reviews from people. Uh, it's, uh, I guess, in a personal way, I could not, as millions of other people as well, I could not get my head around what happened. I mean, how can you how can you believe that a country would murder 6 million people? You can't. So this book was one way of my personal emotional response to try to understand if it's possible. And of course, I found it isn't possible. I did not understand more when I wrote the book, but I did understand myself in relationship to the horrors that
Mhm.
happened.
How much research did you have to do on the book while you were in the process of putting it together?
The research was in my head and my heart,
Mhm.
really.
Okay. Okay. And how long did it take you to complete the writing?
It was a long time. It was longer than other works. It was many drafts, sometimes wholesale drafts where I took out, you know, whole scenes and whole pages. But I wound up with something I like. It's a novella. It isn't a novel. It's
Mm,
short, and people have written me that they've read it in one sitting.
mm,
But it's okay. It just for me was enough. It was enough to write. Also, what am I trying to? Also, I like to write what I would say very cleanly. It's not a lot of words when I'm writing. it's, do you know, oh, what's his name? He's a mystery writer. I can't remember, but anyway, he writes like that. A lot of his stories were made into movies. You know who I mean.
I probably do, but if you can identify like the main character, that would probably be a big help.
I can remember the movies. Well, anyway, he writes what I call cleanly, and that's the
Okay,
way I like to write. So it doesn't take me a long time
sure.
to,
Okay.
to write
Uh,
a piece.
okay. So, one question I really want to ask you is that since you've been writing for quite a while, what advice do you have for writers who are just maybe like they're having problems with the current project, or they think, I think this would be a good story, but I don't know if anybody would want to read it. What if someone came to you and said, Babette, what do you suggest I should do?
That's such a good question. I think I would say just go back to your computer and your chair and write and write and write and write. And then you will find the gem. Then you will find the jewel. But you have to go through self hate.
Well, that is a writer's thing.
Yeah. And it's not anything that you like doing, or, but to me, that's the way. And that is also the way you have a chance of involving your unconscious, which is where the wonderful creative energy is.
Okay, that's great stuff. So okay, we touched on this a little bit earlier. So okay, now that Lessons in Evil is complete, what is next for you? Are you already working on your next book?
I am 101 and a half. And that's a very flattering question. Um, you know, old age is not what I expected. It's a huge challenge if you're not going to go and sit on the couch. If you want to still be part of life, it's hard, but it's doable. It's doable. And our culture does not tell us that. Our culture tells us that we're done when we're X years old. And that's not true. That's not true, but people, they're powerfully affected by their culture and they believe it.
Hmm.
How could they not believe it? But I've learned that we all know uh, the mind gut body connection. We know that. But I have tried to actually connect it as I deal with my old age, and it works. It works. It requires work on the mind or the brain, whatever you call it, of not listening to the culture. The culture teaches us many wrong things, and people are living longer, and they are most do not know that they have choices as they age.
And you have, as far as I can tell, no plans to slow down or stop writing. You just because you enjoy it so much.
Because why?
You because you enjoy the writing so much. So you no plans to stop, no plans to slow down. Just like I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna do my writing for the day.
I haven't thought about it seriously
Oh, okay.
because being 101, it takes a lot of thought and
Mm.
energy and trial and error. And if you're not giving up, that takes a lot of you. It takes a
Mm.
lot of you.
I
But
understand.
it's good stuff. I can tell you, it's good stuff.
Well, that is the important part. I also just realized that the way the show usually works is after we start and we do the introduction, we talk about maybe things we may have read or watched lately, and I totally forgot about that because I became so engrossed in the conversation with you. So we'll wrap things up by talking about that. So I will go first to give you a chance to think about something you've read or watched lately that you want to praise or put down, whatever works for you. That I live near an art house movie theater, and last week my wife and I went to see The Big Sleep with Bogey and Bacall. Hadn't seen it in years, still love it. It was great. Relatively packed house too, so that was really encouraging to see. And also, I've very much been enjoying Shogun on Hulu. Just I think they're doing a phenomenal job with that TV show, and highly recommend it. It's great storytelling, fantastic acting, and just wonderful characters. So, Babette, there's any books or TV shows or movies that you want to shine a light on?
Yes, I just finished the Barbara Streisand autobiography,
Oh, wow.
which she narrates. I heard it on a talking book,
Hmm.
and it's very, very long, and it's very revealing of the kind of brilliant person she is. This is nothing I knew. Uh, she's politically responsibly acting in her beliefs. She's very active, in the Democratic Party.
Hmm.
She, you could make a case that she's a genius.
Mm.
That's how impressed I was with her. It's a very long uh, program, and I understand that it's better than the book. I've heard some
Oh.
people say that. Yeah, her narration was wonderful. Um, and at the end of the book, she makes a totally eloquent, uh, intelligent, as we discussed, hope for the future of our country. And it was in a way not original, but in a way it was original because of her.
Hmm.
And very important because she's very powerful and she puts her power where she should in in the world.
Mhm. Do you think, the audiobook was better than the printed book just because it's literally her reading it and it's her voice?
I did not read the book, but that's what I suspect,
Mhm.
that her voice, and she even includes uh, partially her songs when she talks about it. Then you'll hear her sing a few measures.
Oh, wow. That's a
She,
that I
it
it that is I was gonna say that is a figure that she's not necessarily in the public eye, but she knows how to stay in it, like, almost, like, just within the limits of it.
yes, and she's has such a remarkable resume. My God, she's directed and acted and many, many television specials and
Mhm.
many Broadway shows where she was the leader, many that she directed. And, someone like that with the power, we have to be very grateful for.
Hmm. Okay, well, that the Barbara Streisand autobiography, fascinating stuff. Babette, I have to ask you, so I'm assuming your books, people can get them on Amazon.
Yes.
Okay. And are you on any social media platforms? I know there is BabetteHughesBooks.com. That is your website where people can find out about you and your books and how to get in touch with you. But are you on any of the other social media platforms like Twitter
No,
or?
I've never been on social media.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Well, then it's BabetteHughesBooks.com for anybody who wants to find out more information. Babette, this has been a fascinating conversation with you today. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for inviting me and for asking such good questions.
Well, you're very welcome. I appreciate that. Again, my guest today has been Babette Hughes, and her site is babettehughesbooks.com. I am Paul Ziebman. You can check out my books, all three of them, on Amazon as well. You can check out my screenwriting blog, maximumz.blog. I'm still on Twitter at maximum_z, also on Instagram at Pez Screenwriting, and check out the Twitter account for this show at Podcast CWL. Like I said, that's Babette. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.